Thank you so much. Thanks to SL for inviting me. I mean, it's a great pleasure to be among all of you. It's a great audience, co-investors and investor community, startups, everybody together. I want to go back to Mayank. He started by saying like why he is first. He gave I mean, taking the analogy from him, you can imagine why I am first among the investors. So I am as dumb as him. So, I mean, just on the lighter note, I want to just briefly talk about F50. F50 Elevate is an accelerator based out of Silicon Valley. I'm a partner there, and we are extremely connected in Silicon Valley in the startup community. We do a whole lot of things there, and we had our first cohort completed in last December. Now we are working on the second cohort, which would start from May, and we are heavily focused on health tech and food tech because we believe, I mean, most of us, the founders at F50 and also the community around us, we believe this decade belongs to health and food because there's so much of innovation happening. There is so much of money waiting on the sidelines to get there. So we'll see a lot of activity there. So I'll go on to the topic because I believe we are running late. I mean, very quickly about how investors think. I mean, I'm an ex-founder. I did 2 startups in the past, and I'm also a very active investor. Along with F50, I also run my own fund, and I keep meeting a lot of startups and co-investors and all that. So I'll just share my learnings and my understanding. I mean, it may not be the Bible, but definitely it is. This is what which has helped all through my journey. So the default position of a investor is no, right? The investor, when you approach an investor, he starts with the default position that I don't want to invest, right? So the biggest challenge of a founder is to move him from that default position to the other side, exactly 180 degrees, where he starts saying, yes, I want to fund this company. So that should be the prior challenge for you to approach. You know, this guy is not going to invest in me, so how do I move him from no to yes? First thing. Second thing is never approach an investor. You know, I keep getting a lot of things on the LinkedIn. You know, people just see me like, you know, my title as investor. They just ping, then connect. I default connect with everyone, and then they say, I have an idea, can you invest? And then next thing is, you know, I get a deck. I mean, that is not the right approach. The best approach rather would be when you see, first thing is like a investor chooses a startup where he wants to put money. Even a founder should choose who should be his investor. Investor, if you are trying to bring investor on board at a very early stage, I mean, don't look at him as someone who is bringing money. Look at him as someone who is trying to fill some of the competencies which you lack, right? I mean, every startup will not have every competency you need to be successful, right? Some startups are very tech heavy, some are, you know, marketing heavy, some are, you know, domain heavy. But no startup comes with founders who could do 360 degrees. There are some competency gaps, or you are entering into a market where a particular investor can get on board and fill those gaps. So first look for an investor. Like you, investor chooses startup, you also choose the investor. And then network, use the network, right? You go to LinkedIn, find who knows him, and get some introductions. The best way to have a good conversation, productive conversations, and also some healthy conversations with an investor where you move from right zero no to somewhere midway is to go through an introduction. If somebody introduces an investor saying, hey, I know this guy, or I worked with him, or I know some of his work, then you shifted him a bit towards yes, and that gives you more probability. The next thing is the general habit is everybody pushes decks, right? And obviously the decks are 20 slides, 20 odd slides, and a lot of different information and all that. Ideally, what I would suggest is instead of decks, make a 1-pager summary. One page summary gets read more rather than a deck, because maybe investor would go through 4 or 5 slides, then he loses interest. He may lose the meat, which is at the end. So I mean, you cannot read investor's mind, and you cannot predict what he is expecting. The best thing is send him a one pager, right? I was listening to a couple of pitches here, and I was also looking at people talking about valuations. Some of them really turned me off, because when I look at numbers and when I look at values, they talk about there is no connect. What I would rather suggest is, most of the early startups, this is what we recommend even in our accelerator, is the best way to get a grip of investors, especially quality investors and value contributors, is to look at a SAFE, right? SAFE would be the right thing. Instead of telling I'm valued at 3 million, which would really turn an investor off without even understanding the depth of it, we could always say we are still looking for a lead investor to reach a point and to fix a valuation. That's a very smart answer. Or you could also say we are now only raising through SAFE, which means it is a discount to the next round. That gives huge comfort to the investors, rather than saying okay, I am at 3 million. Then the entire discussion shifts to how did you arrive at 3 million when you have less than 100k of revenue, right? So this is the thing. And the next most important thing in when you're presenting, and especially when you're talking to the investors, even on one-to-one, is to show your domain expertise, right? You show what sort of homework you have done in understanding the space where your idea will be implemented, or the space where you are playing. Unless you exhibit that domain expertise, no one is really keen on your idea. Ideas everyone gets. What is most important is how do you connect with the opportunity. So, talk about market size, talk about your addressable market, talk about what is the niche where blue ocean, where you will go and play, and what is the size and how do you intend to scale it. And that is where the real connection happens between you and the investors. And another most important thing is how prepared you are to get the investments, right? I get across startups where founders come in, and I ask them what is the structure of the company, and they say that we are 3 founders, but we haven't yet decided how to split the equity. That means that really goes back to the point what Mayank was telling here. It talks about culture, it talks about values, it talks about how you are internally organized. If between 3 of you, if you don't have a structured equity splits, then definitely it will turn off an investor. Investor will not have a confidence in you, right? And typically single founder startups are very hard to get invested. Ideally you should have 2-3 founders, at least more than 2 founders, so that investors start looking at it in a more serious way. And another most important thing is speak the truth, speak the facts. Don't sell to investors. Investors, most of the time, the guys are like gray heads like me. They would have spent some time in the industry. They know the dynamics. Investors are extremely networked. They share a lot of information. Investors never do anything alone. Like if I listen to something, I heard about PET, I'm going to go and talk to some of the guys I know. How is the market? What is happening? How is the prospect? So investors always take a lot of opinions before they really put in money. They are reading through a lot of reports, a lot of information and all. Speak the facts. And the best way to connect with the investor is to be very honest and tell him, this is where I have my strength. This is what we think. This is how we are approaching. And this is why we want you on board. You have to create a need for the investor, not just for money, but also for him to play a role in the company. If you simply go and tell him we know what we are doing, you don't worry, we'll give you 5x, 10x. And this is, we saw that statistics here, e-commerce is the best space. I'm in the space which is growing, compounded growth of 15-20%. So don't worry about anything else, just give the money. This is what one startup founder told me. Great idea in Hyderabad. And after that, I wanted to have more conversation, and as I was speaking to him, trying to understand, then it became very evident what he needs is my money, not my involvement. uh, then I don't want to be part of it. Even if you go to Sequoia, they choose companies where they can play a role, because eventually what founder is doing is a sweat equity, but what investor is bringing is hard money. So who need to really protect his interest is investor. And if investor does not see a role for him in the company, he will never put money on table. So the best thing is to have the conversations where you would involve investors, and that's the best way to get the money. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is, I think I think, again, I don't want to relate to what is said here, but if you are going to investor, right, typically they will ask, like, what do you want to spend money on, right? And if you show a marketing heavy split, you will never get invested. So the whole idea is, first you need to have the traction, and then the idea has to be viral, and that is the stage where really investor would see, like, there is a lot of meat in the game, and that is where he will get invested. But if you are going and telling him, like, I'm early stage and I want to put a whole lot of money into marketing, that means you haven't found your recipe how to grow this company, right? So just don't do that. That's a pitfall. Avoid that. And yeah, I think I said most of the things we talk about in most of our community and in Silicon Valley. It's no different from here. Only difference is, like, what I would highly recommend most of the startups, early startups and all, is bootstrapping is the best way to start the company. Put your own money. That also impresses an investor that this guy he is also doing a lot of sacrifices from his side, not just in terms of his time and effort, but also in terms of putting money. This is exactly what happens in US. Most of the founders, right, we hear stories of the founders, like, guys sold their house, moved into a shared accommodations, and they come prepared for 18 months. For 18 months, they have enough money in the bank. That is when they start. No one really goes and raises on PowerPoints, right? So they want to put in effort, have the early success, have the traction, have some revenue, and have a business model which is liked and which is possible to sell. And that is when they start really getting into investors. So, just to summarize, do the homework, do the preparation, create your brand, and network before you really reach out to the investors. And the last and the most important thing is, always have a purpose for the investor beyond money to get involved in your company. And if you are able to manage all this, then fundraising is pretty easy, and there's a lot of money waiting on the sidelines. Investing, especially startup investing, is a new asset class which is growing pretty fast. A lot of individuals want to get there. There's a lot of money, but do it the right way. Thank you very much.